the pyrethroid repellency myth. Do pyrethroids really repel? We're going to discuss it on this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast.
Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek Podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek Podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to another edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. I am your host, Frank Hernandez, here every week discussing all things pests. Hey, we're going to be discussing, do pyrethroids really repel? I mean, for decades, or for more than a decade, I've been hearing people tell me pyrethroids repel. And I sit through CEU conferences, and I hear reps from manufacturers tell us that pyrethroids act as repellents. And then I read a study online, and they say the words pyrethroids are generally recognized as repellents, and things get repeated over and over. Everywhere I read, I hear that a pyrethroid and a non-repellent, and this is the way they talk about it in every study where a pyrethroid was used, a repellent and a non-repellent, and they've classified all pyrethroids as repellents. And I've heard that for 11 years now. And you read it everywhere, and it kind of subliminally registers in your brain that all pyrethroids are repellents. And Daniel Dye III, every time I see that name, Daniel Dye III, it kind of just makes me associate my mind with Thurston Howell III. And you remember Thurston Howell III? That was from Gilligan's Island. And it just reminds me of that. I don't know why I see that in my head. He kind of does look like Thurston Howell. But he brought up this point, and he had two studies to back it up on the pest cemetery. And I said, you know what? He's absolutely right. Because I read it all the time, but I've actually never seen a study on the repellency. And I actually did a podcast on this, to repel or not repel. Now, is it or is it not a repellent? Are pyrethroids a repellent or not? And I had to do some serious digging to look this up, to get validation. But the reality of the fact is, there is no study out there on all the pyrethroids and all the insect classes that a study has actually been done to prove the repellency, other than with mosquitoes. So in the case of most mosquitoes and most pyrethroids, they are repellent. They use them in mosquito nets, and they spray the nets with a pyrethroid to cause the mosquito not to want to enter the net area. And they do it in houses and in structures. They spray the house down. Mosquitoes won't want to be around that structure and not go into the house. And this is done in Africa and in really, really areas of the world where there isn't a lot of control for things. So I had to do the study and see what was actually up. Because I said, it triggered in my mind, and I said, I'm mostly a Berean. And if you don't know what a Berean is, the Berean were a group of Jewish believers in Jesus' time that Paul writes about this. The Bereans were more noble in their thinking because they listened to what I had to say, and then they went back to the Torah and confirmed it to make sure that it was true. In other words, they didn't argue with me about it and say, you're wrong. They went and verified it, and that was different than most other people where they just disagreed with you. And a lot of people in the industry are that way. I have my belief. I know what I believe, and I don't care what you say. I'm not going to listen to you. And I tend to take a different approach. I tend to listen to what everybody says and then verify it. And then I know who I can believe. And that's the way I do it. I know that I can trust somebody that their information is good, or at least their thinking behind it is good. And I went in and looked, and I said, you know what? I'm going to do studying. And I've been working on this for several weeks now. And I came up with some studies, and here's the study of, we shouldn't use it for bed bugs because pyrethroids will repel bed bugs. Well, yet, in the laboratory evaluations of insect products, efficacy for the control of C-mix, bed bugs. I can't pronounce that to save my life. He says, the study also determined that pyrethroid products were not repellent to bed bugs and would not cause bed bug aggregation to scatter or avoid treated surfaces. And I've got a link to that study. Well, and I said, we listened to it. You shouldn't spray for bed bugs with repellents because you can Well, they're saying no, they can't prove it. So the question is, who do we believe? Do we believe the manufacturers? Do we believe that there's some type of conspiracy from the 80s with manufacturers to create non-repellent products and then be able to say, well, these are better because they don't repel and we're not planning to put out any new Pyrethroids because we got 49 on the market? Is there a conspiracy? Is there like something that we need to know that we can't trust people when they say things anymore because they're really looking out for themselves? What's the real deal? I mean, we have to ask ourselves these hard questions. Is there collusion in the industry to come out with new products because we have to basically phase out the old ones and these are, what is it? Makes you wonder. In another study, the excito-repellency of deltamethrin on the malaria vectors Anopheles minimus, Anopheles dirus, Anopheles, forget about it. Mosquitoes in Thailand. They actually show repellency, that it actually does repel mosquitoes. Now, you go to another study, the irritability and repellency of synthetic pyrethroids on Aedes aegypti population from Thailand. It was found that cypermethrin had a stronger repellent effect than other pyrethroids, while the contact irritant effect was similar among compounds treated. So cypermethrin seems to be more repellent than others. Deltamethrin. No, I'm sorry. It is cypermethrin. I'm looking down at my screen. It seems to be more repellent than others. So there is something there. The lambda cyhalothrin, I believe that's demand CS, also has, according to the technical fact sheet by NPIC, has repellent properties. Okay. Now, in another study, the repellency, lethal time, and transference of residual insecticides used for feral ant control by David Anthony Mellis, this is, I think, either his master's or PhD dissertation, both fipronil and lambda cyhalothrin effectively killed feral ant workers in Queens when they were exposed to the treatment. No degree of the repellency was found for either insecticide. I think this is somewhere a long dissertation. I'm shrinking it down to this. This is what he said. So for ant control, for feral ant, they found no repellency. Now, in the comparative toxicity and repellency of microencapsulated and other liquid insecticide formulations to the German cockroach, the data demonstrates the difficulty of making generalization about the relative performance of microencapsulated compared with emulsified concentrate or RTU formulation. In other words, they found no real big difference between the two, and to make a generalization that they all repel is very difficult. So I think that we need to take a look, relook at this whole subject, start asking some hard questions. Here's the problem. A lot of manufacturers, reps, and a lot of people in the industry can't answer a lot of questions because they're told not to. It's very simple. And we don't know. So we have to depend upon now in the information age to go in there and dig it up for ourselves. Because I've been told that. Now, what I did find out about, that I do know is that you don't spray pyrethroids to baits or around baits. They definitely will not eat the bait. That I know. So if you're using baits, avoid using a pyrethroid around the baited areas, because that's definitely not going to hurt you. Guys, this is all I have for you today. I hope you're having a great one, and I will see you next time. By the way, all the studies, I have links to all the studies on the notes. Check them out.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.